What's up, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle. I am Will McFadden, joined by Tori McElhaney and Terrin, Waack. We are breaking down the first on-field practice
We are back
of Atlanta Falcons training camp.
We are back,
baby. We have never been so back. I just want to start.
Yeah, I'm not.
We've never been
I'm
so
so
back. We are so back. How many more times can we say the word back? One more, back. Tori.
Yes.
What was your kind of initial impression of the first day of training camp?
It was a little boring.
Whoa.
We
are definitely back.
It was a little boring. And I say this, but what's hilarious is as we later found out, like once practice was over, it actually wasn't that boring if you were a player. And what I mean by this is they were very scripted in their very first practice. And Raheem told us as we were kind of about to go out to practice, he was like, this is going to be a pretty easy practice, almost basically like a jog through. We're not going full 100. That you can't go.
It was more walking than jogging even.
Right, exactly. It was 25%.
Yeah.
And so you go out there and you're still expecting there to be kind of these like one-on-one battles and individuals and 7-on-7s,
Yeah.
and there was none of that.
A normal training camp,
It
right?
was it was literally just team run through of play designs, and
It was basically minicamp again.
exactly. It was almost what they ended on in minicamp, where they're running through kind of these play designs, and I was just kind of bored. Like, I was kind of just like, well, here they go, another handoff to Bajan.
I did look over, and you pretty early on had the notepad balanced on the head.
Yeah, I've reached a point of like no return when I have a notebook, and it's right here, and if it goes kind of like this on my head, and I'm like just balancing it, we've reached a point in camp where I'm kind of just like, yeah, I'm just here watching.
Can you do the
Day
whole
one,
podcast
great.
though with that on your
I
head?
probably
wanna
could.
know.
I probably
Okay.
could.
Cool.
We'll do that one of these days.
Perfect.
But what was interesting, Kirk Cousins came up after practice, and we were talking to him about how the day went, and it was not boring for him. And the reason why is because he said he got the script for practice the night before, so last night, from Zach
You got
Robinson.
the answers to the test, though. That's cheating.
Exactly, cheating. He wasn't bored. And so he was talking about how he looked at it, and he was like, this is actually very daunting. We're going through a lot. There is a lot of stuff that we are hitting on. And he was like, Zach Robinson threw a lot at us. He was like, I was a little surprised when I saw what we would be doing. I mean, just in terms of the number of motions, the formations, the concepts, the volume of the offense. And they literally had play 1 to play like 87.
Yeah.
Fully scripted out. And they were doing it. That's what they were doing the entire day. And I thought that was very interesting, because if you're just watching it, you're kind of just like, meh. Like, cool. Like, they're handing the ball off to Bajan. They're working on blocking schemes.
Like we want to see one-on-ones between Drake London and AJ Terrell.
Exactly.
And they're like, no, we're going to just try to win football games with our actual 11-on-11.
Exactly. And so I'm sitting there just like, okay, there was a lot more than meets the eye about this first practice.
Yeah, Terrin, was
Judgy McJudgy.
This isn't judging. Here's the thing. I went back, I reevaluated my take, and I have a new one. It's called progress.
That's growth. We contain multitudes. I love that.
Correct.
Taryn, was that kind of your takeaway as well? Like the
Were you bored?
relative like ho-hum, kind of like, oh yeah, they're out there. There they are. But you know, there weren't those one-handed catches or pick sixes, but that was also by design. So did that stand out to you, or was there something else that caught your eye?
Well, they never like split up into their individual position groups. When it came to taking roll, I was like, come on. You can't make it a little easier on me. There's 91 men out there, because you have the international player who doesn't count.
Yeah.
Toward the count, he counts as a person. But what stood out to me most was that when we first came out there, they were already like full-blown special teaming it. They were working on the kickoff return, which I, for one, am super stoked about the change. I think it's really going to change special teams and
rosters,
maybe even the outcome of games. Rosters. It's going to make up the team difference and whatnot like that. So it was cool to see that right away. I know, like, one of our video folks was like, why are they doing this now? But for me, I was like, yes, special teams.
We love special teams.
You're going to hear me harp on special teams a lot.
Special teams?
Training
Special
camp,
players?
I think.
Special teams, Taryn. All right, so we've got the nickname locked in.
Wait, I do have a question. So we saw special teams. We saw a lot of teamwork. Is there a specific drill that y'all were just like waiting to see and we ended up not seeing? Because for me, it was 7-on-7. I was so excited. I live and breathe for 7-on-7, especially in the environment of camp. It's just like mono versus mono, like guy versus guy, Drake London versus AJ Terrell. And it's like, that is fun.
Yeah.
And I almost just cussed right there, but that is fun. And we didn't get any of that. And I'm like, when are we going to get some 7-on-7 action where Kirk Cousins is actually like to like Kyle Pitts?
I mean, for me, it's always like later in camp when they actually start putting the pads on, and then you get the offensive line and defensive line drills. Like that to me is just it's the epitome of camp, though. So all right, I'm gonna let you then have that. I'll say that I love it when the
I had a backup idea though.
I'm not going to steal your backup idea. Don't worry. I love it when the offensive linemen are brought out there at the very end of a training camp practice to field a punt. And it's like, if this offensive lineman catches it, then y'all don't have to run and the defense does. If the defensive lineman catches it, then the offense has to. I love it when that happens. Amazing. So I'll say, when the big guys get involved, that's what I like.
When the big guys get involved. Oh, gosh. Well, I like red zone.
Yeah.
Red zone work because, first of all, they're right there.
You don't have to move.
You're like, I can count all the numbers. They're just right here in front of me.
And my eyes, even like I need the binoculars, even if they're only like 50 feet away. Like, your girl needs to get her eyes checked again.
I think
time for that annual uppage of my contacts.
I think it's hilarious. Terrin's like, I want to be able to see them. And we're like, we want to see them do all this like amazing things.
I think the red zone is exciting too.
It is.
I think they get a little more competitive in that area a bit too, where people get hyped. I'm always thoroughly entertained when someone runs into the pole, which is mean, but it's padded. I don't know.
It's padded, and so are they.
Or when people dunk on the
Right.
goalpost, like I don't know, it's little things like that, like the touchdown celebration where they're right there and hyped, and you can see it. You can see the emotion on their faces. So, it matters that they're close.
Speaking of hype, someone who was hyped to be back out on the field was Grady Jarrett.
Yes.
And I have to say that seeing him back out there and seeing him working alongside David Onyemata, Ruka Rororo, like Braylon Trice, it was right. Like, seeing Grady out there felt like that's what it's supposed to look like. We're supposed to see Grady Jarrett, and not seeing him out there is weird.
There was a photo of Ruka Rororo looking at Grady. Like, you couldn't see Grady's face, but it's just like...
Find somebody who looks at you the way Rook looks at Grady.
I mean, I can't wait for him to learn from the elder Clemson guy. Like, come on.
Yeah. It is awesome. I mean, like having that combination, but also just, again, Grady is so... like meaningful to this team, to this organization.
Grady is Atlanta.
Exactly. And like seeing him, like every time even when I'm like Grady Hospital, I'm like, does Grady own a hospital now? It's like,
I was about to say, is that actually named after him?
No, it definitely is not named after.
Just a partnership.
Okay.
Opportunity.
But it's like you see the name Grady all over Atlanta, right? And it's fitting. But he was kind of walking towards the media room after practice, and I saw, I believe it was Dave Archer, who was just kind of like, man, you look good. And he was like, I feel good. And he did. And he looked just like back. And you could feel almost that like he's just been missing it. Like, because he eats, sleeps, and breathes football. The way that all fans like want their football players to just be like all about ball 100% of the time. That's the way Grady Jarrett is. And so I'm sure it killed him to be away from the team for as long as he did. And Terrin, you wrote a great piece on that at the end of minicamp about just like the lessons that he learned. But now to hear him say that like, I'm healthy, I'm fully cleared, but he is going to have some modified plan. And Terrin, I'll let you kind of like speak on that in a minute. But that he is able to get back out here, and he says it's not a sigh of relief for him, but rather a like motivating factor to go to work for a dominant season. I mean, I just kind of feel like Grady Jarrett may be on the verge of something big this year.
When you talk about like the modified reps, I thought it was a really interesting way that Raheem Morris phrased it in such a manner, because you could just say limited, but modified reps makes it seem like little things here and there will be tweaked. Because at the same time, he's like, to the naked eye, you're not going to know. So I'm like, ooh, challenge accepted.
It's almost a theme of this training camp, of the practice, right? To the naked, like you saying that, I'm like, to the naked eye, none of it looked overly like complicated or impressive
like
or
Kirk
whatever.
Didn't look limited.
Yeah.
Grady didn't look limited, and yet naked eye, I guess.
And I'll say this, Kirk Cousins, this was something that I wrote about now that we're talking about Kirk. I watched Kirk Cousins because I just wanted to see. This is the first chance that you really get to see Kirk Cousins in a training camp mode, and that man, and this is hilarious, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I was there and I feel like I don't think that man ever let Taylor Heineke take a snap.
I don't think so.
I don't think he did, because they were running all these plays, and I think he truly was like, I need to be with this group of people Because I, too, am installing. I, too, am learning. I, too, am getting comfortable. I, too, haven't been on the football field since Grady Jarrett, also in week 8.
Well, that correlation,
that
I didn't realize it until today, that Grady and Kirk were both injured in week 8, and they were meant to play each other the next week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, like, hindsight, the perspective that Kirk added, where he's like, Grady's, like, ACL should have taken longer to come back from, and here they are. And he goes, because it's Grady Jarrett. Like, that's how it is.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, chef's kiss on a quote, first of all. But it's just perspective, and I love, like, when
it's kismet.
Worlds collide.
Yeah, it's just, but it's also, that's such a thing that so many coaches will say is like, it does depend on the player, which is why they're reticent to usually give injury timelines because everybody's body heals differently. But, you know, the first time around with Dan Quinn and Julio, and when Julio would get kind of dinged up, like, Dan was always just like, it's Julio. Like, he's going to be back here probably faster than a normal person would. And I think Grady kind of falls under the same umbrella, especially given his work ethic and how I'm sure he approached rehabilitation in the same way that he approaches his craft of being an incredible pass rusher out there on the field.
Superhuman.
Before we move on, though, like, let's actually address the elephant in the room, which is whether or not we'll see Kirk and Grady in preseason games.
Right.
And this actually came out from Kirk Cousins himself, and he even joked. He goes, "I think I maybe like let the cat out of the bag on this one, but," and he didn't do that. That was
Wait,
me.
what did he say?
He said that he wouldn't be playing in the preseason, or like he alluded to that fact. He kind of said like, "I have said that I want to, but I think that's fallen on deaf ears." Was the quote?
Yes.
And he said, you know, maybe there's a conversation to be had with Raheem Morris, because I do think like the live bullets and everything like that, like there is something to be said. But also he was like, at the exact same time, I understand why. I'm going into year 13. I'm coming off of an Achilles. Like, we want to make sure that we're making the right decisions. So it's interesting. That's absolutely something that I think Raheem Morris will be asked about in the coming days,
especially now.
Especially now.
Way to go, Kirk.
And so I think like that's something we got to keep an eye on, and it'll be something that, honestly, y'all come back to this podcast, because I'm sure we will be talking about that again.
I'd be surprised.
On the flip side, though, it makes sense given what we did see in practice today, because if you're a coach, right, why expose this quarterback that you have brought in now to be your franchise quarterback? He is brand new, right?
But you know who he
is not new to live action against an NFL defense. I don't think there's anything that he's going to see in a preseason game defensively that he's not seen already throughout his career. I think it may be way more beneficial to have him taking 87 snaps out here on the first training camp
Which
practice
it felt
day.
like he did.
Yeah, under like controlled environment situations, work with your teammates, get acclimated that way. You know, I get last year with kind of the decision with Desmond Ridder and kind of like, how do we want to handle the preseason? And I know that a lot of fans in hindsight were kind of like, could he have used a little bit more run in the preseason and some of the starters maybe overall? But this is a completely different scenario in my mind, because you're dealing with a veteran quarterback who, before he got hurt, was playing at the top of his game. So I kind of think that the mental acuity that Kirk Cousins has is part of the reason why, if they do choose, and we don't know yet, the 3 games haven't happened, and Kirk said, like, we may get down to joint practices in Miami, they may see something and then decide, hey, we do want to see Kirk out there and how he handles this. Again, I'm a little like suspicious that will happen, because I personally would want to protect my guy.
See, I personally want to at least see a little bit.
Here's my thing.
That's interesting.
Everyone knows this about me. I hate the preseason. I hate preseason games. I don't want them. Let's just go straight to the season. These guys are professionals. They can go out there as long as they're acclimated. Let's do it. I am so anti-preseason.
Whoa.
And I understand that is a huge hot take for some people, because that it does matter for, like, you know, bottom turning of rosters and everything like that. But I feel like right now I can tell you who this team is and who's going to be the starters, God willing, knock on wood, like, going into the season.
First and second team at least.
Right. So I'm at this point, I'm just kind of like,
I already made a depth chart. Let's go.
I'm the depth chart's done. I'm done.
Take mine.
And I mean, that is where obviously we will see some things evolve and shape. But like, it felt maybe that's part of what we were a little surprised by today, because it did almost feel like a practice that could take place in like September, October, where it's like, all right, these guys have their rhythm, their routine. Everybody's where they need to be. Everybody's kind of watching, paying attention, getting in and out of the huddle. Like, Bijan made a couple of nice cuts today where I was like, yeah, everybody looks a little more comfortable and kind of coming into a routine, which is weird given the turnover with kind of the head coach and some of the coordinators and stuff. You don't usually see that, but because it did feel like nothing super duper stood out today outside of the maybe normality of how it all felt.
Yeah.
Was there anything, Terrin, that did stand out as kind of like surprising or caught your eye?
I thought Nate Landman, I think, starting alongside Caden Ellis over Troy Anderson. But I say that with the caveat that 2 reps later, Troy Anderson rotated in.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, one's a starter, one's not. It's not like that. And I'm very curious as to how it's going to play out. I think that's more so it. It's not the fact that, like, Nate was there first, but it's more so how much are they going to rotate in the season? You and I were talking about that on the sideline. Like, this isn't a position that normally rotates as much in game, but are they going to do that since they have such talented, 3 talented inside linebackers where it's like, why not?
Yeah.
So
and they all 3 work together in twos periodically throughout practice. Yeah. Like the grouping was different almost every 2 plays.
Which is the weird thing because it's like there's
so much change.
There's 3 guys for 2 spots, right?
And also someone has the green dot.
Yeah.
And so if it's Caden Ellis and Caden Ellis is taken out, and then is it Nate Landman? Is it Troy Anderson? Like,
if there's one guy that I think will be out there 90% of the time, it's Caden.
Yeah. Right. But there were times where he wasn't out there today.
There were.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that's
combination permutation, there are 6 options.
Right, yeah.
You just threw a lot of words at me.
I know, I was a big math nerd in high school. But I never remember which one's which, so I just said both.
Oh, man.
All right. Honestly, I would be very intimidated to be your teacher.
I think that's a good... I think that we should move on to a new segment that we are... implementing, which I'm really excited about. This is from the
Tori's calling audible.
This is from Will McFadden's brain. You want to tell him about Camp Champ and what it is and how it's going to go down.
Yeah, so Camp Champ, basically, we're going to be here after every training camp practice. Unfortunately, again, fans are not able to be here, so it should just be a really easy way to like kind of each of us go through and nominate the player that stood out to us out there on the field, or we think maybe overall just like had a great day of camp, whether that was performance or just like, I can lead it off with my guy, like James Smith-Williams, who we saw running with the first team defensive line. He's my camp champ because I didn't predict that coming into day one that he was going to be the guy. We thought maybe it would be Zach Harrison out there, or I wouldn't have been necessarily as shocked if it was Contavious Street or a Taquan Graham or an Eddie Goldman, but like, I just didn't have him on my bingo card.
Yeah, he was playing in too. So Arnold Ebiketie. Like we have been talking about AK and how like he would be playing opposite Lorenzo Carter. That was James Smith-Williams today.
We haven't talked about James Smith-Williams.
We have not. So
I'm so sorry, bud.
Right, and it's interesting because you go back into OTAs and the way that they were rotating the defensive line every now and again was they had guys who had been in the league for 3 years or longer and guys who had been in the league in 3 years or less.
Yeah.
On different like hockey lines almost of defensive linemen, and that's how they were kind of rotating it in different sections of practice, which I thought was fascinating. So when James Smith-Williams was with Lorenzo Carter in this role on this defensive front, I was just kind of like, oh, it's because they're doing this like old guys versus the young guys type of thing.
Is there a chance that is the case?
And that may be it.
We didn't really see Brandon Dorless or Ruka running with that group in particular. So this may be a day one, hey, like we're getting the veterans, the guys, so we can run a faster set of 11 on 11 and we're not having to stop every little while to kind of like clue a rookie in. There's a chance that that's the case. But again, I didn't see this coming. So for that reason, he's my camp champ.
I love it.
Tori, who you got?
I'm going to stay on the defensive line, and I'm going to say my camp champ is Grady Jarrett, and I say this because of everything that we've already said. Him being out there makes sense. Him being out there is normal, it's natural, and I think that it also ups the level of competition, even though they're not going 110%. Grady Jarrett has this mindset, and he's talked about it. Raheem Morris has talked about it. Dan Quinn used to talk about it. Like every person who's interacted with Grady has talked about the intensity of which he brings and how he shows up the same way every single time.
He really does. It's
he
like,
is 110%.
It's insane. Like
as a person.
Yeah. Like unless you experience it, I know people like it's a cliche almost at this point for an Atlanta media member to be like, Grady Jarrett, what a guy.
Right.
But like, It really is. When you see it every single day and he's the same person and brings the same, it's just incredible. Terrin.
Yeah. No, what I wanted to add, I'm so sorry. One more thing is it actually goes back to something that you said, that Kirk said about the reason why I picked Grady Jarrett too was because Kirk was like, this is not a guy who, but the nature of his injury and the nature of the recovery.
He shouldn't be back.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know he said training camp, but I didn't expect this capacity.
Yeah, right off the bat.
After a mandatory minicamp, he said he'd be back for training camp, but he even admitted, I might be off to the side, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. It's like, no,
he
you
was
were
right there in the middle.
trenches.
This is the first snap. The first team snap.
My gosh, day one.
The Grady element of it is just a good, I think, way to wrap up this conversation, because his return is emblematic of maybe what this first day of practice represents, which is it's maybe more meaningful when you're digging in closer to the backstory, what it means, how all the work that kind of took behind the scenes, I think, to get to this point, even though on the surface, there's nothing unusual about Grady Jarrett being in Atlanta Falcons training camp practice and being right there on the starting with the ones, and he looks the same as he always does, which is awesome.
This is the 10th time it's happened.
Exactly.
It shouldn't be this novelty thing that we're talking about. And yet here we are, because of the context of the last year, talking about it.
Exactly. So it's today's practice, again, to the naked eye, probably wasn't anything to really write home about, but it felt, and hearing the players talk about it, that they're being intentional in some very interesting ways. This coaching staff is with their plan, and it's not anything I've experienced when I was here. Tori, I don't know if you've experienced anything similar to this kind of plan rollout, but I'm very excited to see how it goes, because I'm a big fan personally of just people trying different things, trying to go against the grain and kind of let's see if this works, right? And learning from smart people, and that's kind of what this feels like.
And this is also what we're doing with the podcast. We're trying different things this year. So obviously we're coming to you every single day after every single practice. So make sure that you are anywhere you get your podcasts. Well, I'll let you
subscribe,
all of the things. Atlanta Podcast Network, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts again. We will be there.
We will definitely be there. But I think we're settled on Grady Jarrett as our first official camp champ. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we will be back breaking down the second training camp practice with our second camp champ. We're going all throughout training camp with that. Hopefully, we'll have the camp champ himself come on for the final edition and crown him the camp champ of 2024 Atlanta Falcons training camp. But we are the collective champions of this training camp podcast. Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm Will McFadden, Tori McElhaney, Terrin Waack. We will see you guys tomorrow.